So welcome to another episode of Alumni Career Conversations. I'm Bryan Kanney, and today I really have the pleasure, I'm so excited to introduce Akosua Ampofo Siever. Now, she is a 2009 graduate of the SID program. That's correct?
That is correct.
Well, welcome to this virtual space conversation we have going on.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be part of the series of conversations.
Well, great. So I'm really excited to talk about you. The first thing I really wanted to do was just kind of give folks a general introduction to your busyness. Essentially, you are Senior Partnerships Manager at Root Capital, which I'm excited to learn more about. You are also a Diversity Committee co-chair at Brooks Elementary School of Medford. And if that's not enough, you are also a member of the board of directors at Boston Women's Fund, a wife, and you have a daughter. So I've never felt so unproductive in my whole life. You are so busy, and it's wonderful.
Well, thank you. I have a lot of support to manage everything, and so it's certainly not me on my own.
Well, I would hope so. And that's really my first question that I thought I would ask you is, how do you manage work-life balance with all of these roles?
I can't say that I have cracked the nut yet, but I do have a great support network, and my husband and partner is incredible at helping me achieve the things that I want. And so he certainly has stepped up a lot to support childcare. I'm actually a terrible cook and he does all of the cooking. And so that frees up a lot of my time to move forward with some of the things that are really important to us, including social justice and looking at issues of equity and equality in the world. So
Yeah,
I get to do all of this.
yeah, so you are very busy, and it sounds like you have a support network, and you're able to maybe divide some home chores and tasks that allow you to really focus on all of this productivity. So that's great. I'm wondering if you're comfortable sharing a little bit. I really like your personal story. We've talked in the past, and I thought I'd bring up some of that forward. So you're originally from Ghana, but
That's
you spent, yes, okay, good. So you spent time in Kenya, Tanzania, and you really grew up in a family of international development practitioners. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that experience.
Sure, yes. So I am originally from Ghana, but I've never really lived in Ghana. I was born in East Africa in Kenya, and then spent my formative years in Tanzania. My father worked during the time that I was in Tanzania, worked with SID, which is an international research center for tropical agriculture, and really was immersed in the whole development community. And so growing up, the friends of my the parents of my friends were development practitioners. I was exposed to the work that my father was doing, and often had the privilege of visiting some of the projects that he was leading on. And at an early age, it really opened my eyes to questions around equity and access and decision making about investment. I don't think I was using those terms as a 13-year-old, but I was certainly wondering who decision makers were, as we're driving into remote villages and seeing huge billboards advertising education projects or water and sanitation projects, and wondering, who's dictating and determining what project should come in and what type of education support and where, the water pumps are being placed and who has access to them. And so I started to ask questions and, do small research projects. And of course, when you start to dig, especially at that level, you always find things that, are sensational. You hear about all of development gone wrong, and it makes you, like question and wonder more about who has the answers and who is equipped to do this, and why are we not seeing more people from communities driving change? And so that was a concern of mine, and sort of what took me through college.
Yeah, so what I find really unique about your experience is oftentimes when I was working with undergrads in a career capacity, they say, "Oh, Bryan, my mom says I should do this. Bryan, my teacher says that I should become this." And so from your perspective, this wasn't a matter of parent influence. This is truly something, I mean, there was some influence, right? Like you were going and seeing because of family dynamics. But this is truly a decision that this was a decision that you made on your own, that you were truly compelled by this particular issue.
Yes, in fact, for a brief moment, during the first year of college, I went to Clark for my undergraduate. I thought, oh, maybe I could do something glamorous like advertising. And after maybe 3 or 4 weeks of playing around with this idea, I thought to myself, I don't think I could live with myself if I took on a career that compelled people to make decisions that were not really in their best interest. I'd rather be on the flip side, working with people to change systems so that those systems work in the favor of the communities that have to live through those systems. And I'm very glad I came to that realization early.
Yeah, that seems to have worked out in your favor. Instead of somehow convincing people they need to buy a Twinkie, we've rethought the true meaning of what your work should look like. So, do you want to talk a little bit about the commitment that you maintain to developing and implementing community-led programming that disrupt systems that perpetuate poverty among marginalized groups?
Sure. So I'd say that right now I'm trying to achieve that in a number of different ways. So at Root Capital, I'm part of a large team, and I sit within our development, division. And so it's not that I'm speaking directly to community members and advocating with them, but more that I'm supporting the mission of our organization, which is to improve access to finance, so that organizations, rural agricultural businesses have the access that they need so that they can make their own decisions about how they want to grow and where they want to expand, and they can directly support farming households, as opposed to us coming in and saying this is really what you should do and this is the best way to grow. But they're asking us for the money, we're approving the funds, and they're making the decisions about how to use those funds. So that's one way in which I've continued to maintain the commitment to working on behalf of communities and ensuring that communities have access to what it is they need to make the decisions that they want to make. Another way, so with that distance, I've tried to find ways of creating proximity to that sort of advocacy and partnership with communities, and that's through the Boston Women's Fund, where our board is a very engaged board, very hands-on. We work with an amazing team of two, so executive director and development director, and both of them are able to incredibly manage our programs and work with our grantees and embed themselves within the community. But we have very thoughtful conversations about what's happening in the landscape, who the actors are, how do we create shifts in power dynamics, how do we influence funding streams, how do we get more money into the hands of grassroots organizations that are being led by women and other minority groups. So that's pretty exciting work. It's a work that is happening right now and changing our ecosystem, even if it's at a local level. And then at a much closer to me, closer to home, I guess, it's a 5-minute walk to my daughter's school. I said I'm a co-chair of our diversity committee. You won't believe it. Guess how many diversity committees there are in the Medford School District?
In the Medford School District. Well, because you're having me guess, I'm gonna say just the one.
Just the one. And so it feels like the work that we do is important, maybe more so because there aren't other school PTO committees doing it in quite the same way. But it's this great opportunity to work with amazing people who have share the same values and are looking to create a community that is supportive of different types of people coming from different types of background. It's creating a school community that's going to help nurture young people who are looking out for one another, embracing and celebrating how they show up differently, but can still come together to move forward. And to know that it's going to have a direct impact on my daughter is very exciting for me. So doing this work in a number of different ways, it helps me stay close to it, even if my primary role on my full-time job is a little bit further away from the communities that at the end of the day are hopefully benefiting.
Yeah, so you've been very intentional about the work that you do, and you continue to satisfy your values and your vision, your professional and personal identities. So that's really incredible. I'm wondering how sort of the racial justice conversation at the forefront of our country right now has impacted maybe your work specifically, or these other committees that you're a part of.
It's a really good question, and it's being addressed in different ways. In part because of the different types of roles each of the institutions play in the space. So, Root Capital, being an international organization, has looked at the issues in a number of ways, especially with a strong focus on how can we be more transparent, more aware, and how can we educate ourselves as an organization to break through our own biases, and also be a source of support and walk beside people of color and address the issues of racial justice head on. We have a diversity committee, diversity, equity, and inclusion committee that is actively looking at different ways in which we can support the organization, particularly the US-based community, and looking at ways that we can also partner with our country level offices to do similar work that focuses on the priorities at the country level. So that's one way in which the conversation has, come up. So for Root Capital, for instance, and then for the Boston Women's Fund being right in the middle of, social justice issues, we are a small foundation, so haven't had as much money, say, to push out in front of the issue, but have been in front of the issue, working with our grantees, providing information, staying in close communication to ensure that we can make connections or provide other resources to support our grassroots grantees as they work through these issues as well for their communities. And then as part of the PTO, we've been looking at different ways in which we can reach out to the school community to make sure that we understand how the different families are being affected by what's happening right now, thinking ahead to what the school year will look like and how we can support students re-enter. We prepared a survey which we hope to put out, but right now there's so much happening within the space, within the school district around racial justice. I feel positive about the direction that the school district is going in. And so it's about collaboration, and it's about listening and working together. So we don't lose momentum, so we keep moving forward, but so that we're not duplicating or, we're maximizing our efforts, essentially.
Yeah, this is really a heavy topic. And I think something that was said that compels me is that for some, this doesn't matter. You can't make change until you change people's mindsets and their hearts. And I wish I could remember who said that specifically, to give credit where credit is due, but that's something that I have found really compelling and sticks with me today. So as I was watching the funeral today of Rep. Lewis, I saw that passion for justice, for equality. It's just, I commend you for what you're doing. And you mentioned a number of pieces that like we have to be mindful of our own internal biases. This isn't just a US issue. Look at how it affects other countries. So I think that you've spoken to this really well.
Thank you. It's really something that's close to us because my family is interracial and my daughter is biracial. And I do wonder, she presents as Black in the American sort of in this space. And so I worry about what her experience is going to be. I feel like there is a difference in how people are treated based on where, if you are African American versus African coming in versus an immigrant.
Mm.
It was interesting. The other day, we were reading a story about Russian immigrants set at the turn of the century. And I was reading the story and I kept using the word immigrant because that's what it said in the book. And then my daughter said, "You really shouldn't use that word. It's really not nice." I said, "What do you mean it's not nice?" She said, "It means someone from somewhere else who's not wanted here." I said, "That's not what it means. And I'm an immigrant." And then I named some other immigrant families that look different from myself. And despite all that, I'm trying to communicate, and that she's my daughter, she's clearly in my ecosystem, that she's still coming away with these negative images and stereotypes. So I mean, we have so much work to do, even at home. It's a tremendous effort that we just need to work jointly to break.
Yeah, because if she's learned that that negative connotation to immigrants, she's not the only one who's learned it. So,
Right.
where did she learn it? How do we address this? Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing that piece. And I thought maybe we would transition a bit to talk about um, maybe sort of your career development in terms of shifting from organizations and just kind of what your experience has been.
Sure. So you earlier on you asked me how I'm able to do the different things that I do, and I said, I don't do it alone. I really rely on a network of peers, support, friends, colleagues, and so transitioning through different jobs, even different fields, in a sense, in part was facilitated by a strong network. So I always, when talking to people who are, earlier in the earlier stages of their career, I always promote networking and going to events and meeting people and understanding how that can play a role in helping you go where you'd like to go. So started out at really at Africare in DC and that came right out of the practicum experience at the Heller School. So was there for about a year and a half or so, and then came to Boston, mostly to be closer to my now husband. And so when I came to Boston, I joined World Education and was there for a little over 7 years. So as a program officer, really doing a range of things from supporting proposal development writing to supporting program implementation and management, and really learned a range of skills. But then after 7 years and having my daughter, it was time for some change. And I had began to feel a little bit of distance from the communities and wanting to get closer, especially as I wasn't traveling quite as much, especially at that time, and thinking, maybe it's time now to transition my focus from international community development to domestic community development. And that's when I transitioned to the Massachusetts Public Health Association. And actually, I would say the timing was serendipitous. It was 2016, and I'd just become a citizen of the US, and it was the first time I'd ever voted in my life. It was also the first time that I'd had real conversations in a professional setting about racial justice, even though my whole career we're working with a diverse set of people. It had never really come up until that point. And I found that in the depressing moments of the outcome of the 2016 elections, I felt lifted by MPHA, the Massachusetts Public Health Association, because I was armed now with these tools around policy, understanding how to advocate for change, having tools and language around what racial justice is, what it could be, how do we come together to change things. I think it was a powerful moment and helped me see myself take on a more active role. And so coming out of the Massachusetts Public Health Association is when I joined the Boston Women's Fund, because I wanted to play a more active role at the community level. At the same time, I did miss my international development work. And so that's what led me to come back into the space with Root Capital. So now I get to play both roles, and I think that satisfies my desire to continue to contribute towards development, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, but also to give back to the community that I live in right now.
Mm. So there was a lot of great information in there. I definitely want to give you props for giving us recognition on the power of networking. So out of all of that, thank you for giving us that piece of information. So I'm wondering, through your transitions, I believe you haven't necessarily served as hiring manager, but you've served on hiring committees. I'm wondering, what advice would you offer maybe international students who are here seeking, whether it's OPT, H-1B, just seeking opportunities here in the United States? What sort of advice would you offer them?
Well, update your resume. I guess that's obvious. Try and find someone within the organization to speak to. Keep it informal. It doesn't have to be formal. In fact, they're more likely to speak to you if they don't feel like they're hiring you per se, and then you charm them, and then they want to recommend you internally. Understand what it is you're walking into. Do your homework. People can tell if you read the website, if you read any of their reports. And that's also the other value of having some informal conversation with someone before going into a formal interview. And then be honest and true to yourself as well. If it's not something that you're really going to be interested in, it'll also come across, if not in the interview, soon after you start working. And times are stressful enough that if you are able to get something that you can be passionate about, that's always better.
Yeah, it's really tough to market yourself as excited and genuinely interested in something where you have no genuine interest in pursuing. So yeah, that's easily recognizable. I'm wondering, your first role was a World Education outside of Heller, is that right?
My first role outside of Heller was actually with Africare.
Okay.
They're based in DC. That's also where I did my practicum. And then around the time I graduated from the Heller School was when I joined World Education.
I see. So do you remember how you what your experience was navigating sort of that application process?
It was very stressful. I feel like I was one of the last 3 people to get a practicum. It was probably July when this opportunity came through, July or even August, so you can imagine. Yeah. And again, I think it was a friend of faculty, had invited a couple of the students over for dinner. And we were talking about what we were, hoping to do. And he made the connection, made an introduction. He says, I know this group, they're really great. I think you'd like working with them. Let me introduce you. So really, a lot of the opportunities that I've had are through introductions and conversations that networks have facilitated. So that's what I remember about that experience. It was stressful because it took me a long time to find something. And when I was able to get it, it was because of a network introduction. But it was a fantastic opportunity and really paved the way.
Yeah. sounds like a common theme there. There's something to this. I'm wondering, no, I didn't prepare you for this, but I'm wondering if you gave a current state of development, what positive do you see? So in the world today, we're kind of bogged down with COVID and just sort of racial injustice and all of these pieces. So let's end with a real positive. There's a shining light to the end of this state of the state for development.
Yeah, no, I think that at least the people that I speak to, I think that in this moment of crisis on different levels, from, intense job loss, racial justice, the pandemic, people being sick and people being stuck at home, and then all of the other usual challenges that we all face, I feel like people are being really human and people are being more understanding than perhaps they might have been before because they see themselves in the situation. They recognize that we're in it together. I found that people are more open to have conversations. Zoom or whatever medium you use to communicate is, where I'm having more conversations than I did when I could travel or schedule an in-person meeting. And I'm seeing that people are willing and eager to collaborate. So I feel like there's a real spirit of people wanting to come together and wanting to do something about what's happening, and feeling generous about how they can play a role.
Yeah, so a real sense of humanity and
Yes,
compassion.
yes.
Yeah. Well, Akosua, I want to thank you so much for your time. It's been lovely chatting with you. Again, I have been so excited to do this, and I'm glad that we were able to make it happen. So I just want to thank you for your time with the Alumni Career Conversation.
Thank you.